cost to acquire is oftentimes looked at, I spent this money, $1, and I acquired this much money on the back end, $2.
If you gain 10, lose 10, and you're out $100 every single one, because again, they pay you 900, it costs you 1,000, you start to see that you're now setting up a losing model.
Dashboards, PPA, round 2
PPAs.
and beyond right now, because it's beyond the pump. We're going to break down the PPA numbers a little bit more in depth today because, why not go deeper instead of just keep going wide?
Some people really enjoy. I can't say that.
Yeah, don't say that.
I think they listen to it for that.
Probably there's a portion, I'm sure. There's a It's funny. I had so a friend of mine reached out and he's like, "Hey, can you listen to my new podcast?" And I actually mentioned you in the episode real quick, blah, blah, blah. So I'm sure, no problem. I'm going to listen to it. And yesterday I was listening to it, and today I made a Facebook post about it just to help support him and everything. But in the beginning, it's him and his wife talking. And his wife is something like, okay, no, you picked the topic today. Like, I'm going to be the submissive wife. And I'm like, so I send them both a text, just fun. I'm like, Allison, I don't really think you're the submissive wife, but hey, go Lance. And then Lance is like, oh yeah, I tell her she should start a club and teach other wives and everything like that. So we play into the joke a little bit. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna help support this club creation and go buy you guys another domain. And the point of the story and why it linked back was I bought them the domain for their podcast a year ago, which was one of the kind of big catalysts for them to finally go do it. So I go and I search submissivewives.com, okay, on GoDaddy. It's available. It's 100% available. You can
like
buy
$10,000.
it easy, okay?
How much was it?
It wasn't cheap. Yeah, it wasn't cheap. It was thousands. So I send them a screenshot and I'm like, hey, I got your new domain. You're all ready to go. I go, the problem is after thinking about it, I think you're going to like the wrong audience is going to end up here and not really what you guys are looking for. So
bunch of
it was a fun joke, but anyways, tangent, sorry. But
well, I think it's a good segue actually, because when you consider like the nature of what we understand that, and the assumption is people know what we know, and these part 2, 3, and 4 of the PPA formula and diving into like the cost to acquire, the cost to fulfill, and lifetime value, I think is really, really an essential part. And when we think about the cost to acquire effectively, and why I asked you about how much the domain was, is that, some domains GoDaddy will sell you for like a penny for the first year and then like $20 a year after that. But then when you think about if you're a brand new business, you're strapped for cash, and let's say you have $100 in your account to invest in your business, it probably wouldn't make sense to go buy several $1,000 domain that's available from someone that already owns it and has SEO, directed to it and whatever else. And so when we think about the cost to acquire, there's always this balance of how much is it going to cost you to do something or get something, and then kind of the other costs that come along the way. And I'm sure most people would agree that if you had to spend $10,000 to make $5,000, so you're negative $5,000 at the end of it, it wouldn't make sense. And I think that this episode of the kind of going over the cost to acquire, I think that really is going to be insightful for people to weigh in and determine if something's really worth their time or their effort.
Yeah, it's interesting. Everybody always looks, which very much so. And this is, I want to be clear again, right? PPA does not replace financial reporting, your P&Ls, your balance sheets, all those things. It also doesn't replace the data that you're getting out of the systems. If you're doing paid advertising with Meta, your cost per lead, CPL, still is a relevant number, right? Like those things are still important, but we want to find a way to create a hierarchy around our data, keep things that are of equal importance next to things that are of equal importance. So that way you understand like, cool, this number, that number, like they sit next to each other. I can weight them the same. That number sits 3 rungs below that number. They're not weighted the same, and just give you a little bit more guidance in that decision-making process, right? So the quick caveat here, but cost to acquire is oftentimes looked at, I spent this money, $1, and I acquired this much money on the back end, $2. Now, to your point, Andrew, it becomes really obvious on the front end. If I spend $10 to make $5, that's a losing argument out of the gates. But what a lot of people fail to look at is if I spend $10, they give me $11, but it costs me $5 to go in and service this. Well, you end up, while you made $1 on the advertising side, you're then now -4 on your total ecosystem when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
fulfillment. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really the power of cost to acquire playing that role within the entire profit per acquisition formula. So we're
Mm-hmm.
specifically talking about our cost to acquire here. You mentioned the website. When you go buy a website, it is something that is effectively amortized over the course of a year. Whether you pay for $12 or $2,000, it is a 1-year expense, right?
So hang on, before you get too far into it, a lot of the listeners may not know what the word amortize means. Can you maybe
No,
explain that as
nope,
well?
fuck them. No.
Okay,
Yeah, Google that
Google that
shit.
shit, you
No,
ignorant
so
mother.
amortization is going to effectively be, you might pay for something, a yearly membership, right? You only pay one time, but you can use this thing for a year. A website, a web domain typically ends up being one of those things. You amortize it, or you divide out whatever you paid over the course of time. So if you spent $12 for a yearly thing, it ends
Mhm.
up costing you $1 per month. $1,200 is $100 per month. 12,000 would be $1,000 per month.
So the amortized is like the total
Yeah, the total
amount.
amount, and then we take that total amount divided by the amount of time that it's being used for, and that's the amortization
Mm-hmm.
schedule you might hear. So now we understand this is
Yeah.
how much per month it ends up kind of hitting me. Now, and we're going into the
Okay.
weeds a little bit on your basis of accounting,
Sure.
if you will. But there's two primary
Mm-hmm.
ways that accounting happens. If you're a smaller business, you're doing
Mm-hmm.
tens of thousands of dollars, a couple $100,000, you're operating on a cash basis accounting, right? What that means is
Mm-hmm.
when the money comes in and out, it is recorded on your P&L, your profit and loss sheet, and you look at that information. An actual accrual based accounting would take this $12 that you spent for your web domain and apply a deduction in that domain category, however you did it, of $1 every single month. It spreads it out over the amortized amount. A lot of larger companies, companies that are C Corp elections, things like that, will end up
Yeah.
kind of doing what they call GAAP based accounting, generally accepted accounting principles, GAAP, GAAP.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where accrual comes in. So very much in the weeds and a rabbit hole on this one. For most of you listening, you're probably going to be some type of S corp. And again, this is not a suggestion. Do whatever your tax professional suggests you do, but understanding how your books and
Mm-hmm.
everything works is important to understanding how it rolls into cost to acquire, but ultimately what would be profit per acquisition. Right now, to keep it simple, if
Yeah.
you spent money this month, it goes into the expenses towards your marketing fees.
100%. And guys, if you want us to cover any of those topics, whether you don't know anything about what entity structure you should have, how to pay yourself, like these are all kind of the business owner things that no one's really formally taught. You just happen to stumble across these lessons. And in fact, we knew of a company that was looking to get bought that ended up having the wrong type of election, and it cost them what, like millions of dollars, and the sale ultimately fell through because of the improper classification and the tax burden that someone didn't want to absorb. So if you want to avoid any of these things and you're worried about those problems right now, again, comment below, give us a like, so that way we know that this is something that you want us to further explore. Otherwise, I'm going to talk about nutrient density, and we're going to we'll just talk about vitamin A
Sliding filament
metabolism.
theory.
So that's really important. So if you don't know what the sliding filament theory is and how muscles contract, shame on you. You are going to be doomed to fail as a personal trainer. I'm totally kidding. It's not relevant at all. It's just a fun little theory, and that's why they call it a theory. But again, like if you, as you're listening to this, if you find that you have a thing that we mentioned that you don't know about, comment it below, and we'll make sure we either take time to explain it in the comment back, because we do respond, or we'll create a future episode for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So all that to say,
So
you know,
So cost to
um,
acquire, that's
yeah.
a key component
Mhm.
in any business. And we're always talking acquisition and sales. It's obviously a hot topic. Hey, let's get 10 clients in 10 days and make 10K for your first 30 days type stuff. Like that's a thing that we see all the time. This isn't a
Type shit.
bad or good thing. This is just factual right now. But the reality is there are always costs that we're not actually understanding in our business. You have personnel costs, people who are on your team, maybe yourself. If you are a solopreneur and you spend half of your time doing marketing and sales for your business, guess what? Half of what you pay yourself should be quantified in the expenses that go towards your acquisition costs, right? You pay yourself $4,000 a month. $2,000 is going toward your acquisition costs. A lot of time people will ask that question, go, I don't spend anything because I don't spend anything. I'm like, wait, so you don't put any time there? Well, no, I do. Oh, okay. How much do you pay yourself? Well, I pay myself $10,000 a month. Well, how much of your time do you spend on that? Oh, like 30 hours a week. Oh, okay. How many hours a week do you work? Well, I work 60 hours a week. Oh, so half of your week you spend doing marketing and sales stuff. Yeah. I go, isn't it realistic to say that half of your pay, because half of your week goes towards your acquisition costs? And it's like, oh, well, I didn't really think about it that way. Cool. Welcome to putting your big boy or girl pants on and starting to own and run a business. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means we need to start tracking somewhere, because at some point in time, you're going to go, can I hire somebody? I want to do this thing. I want to pay for that thing. And you need to be making wise decisions in those moments. Your time is not free. It does cost something. The other things is you there's the obvious stuff. If you do paid advertising or boosting posts or pay for a specific marketing type platform, that is something that yeah, I paid for that. It's marketing. Your recurring subscription. So if you have a CRM, we talked about CRMs in a prior episode, that is a paid thing in your marketing world. If you have a closer or a setter that makes a percentage or you pay a flat fee to or whatever, those salaries go into that acquisition cost and what's going on, right? So anything that can be attributed to marketing and sales, effectively anything that is not just running your business, all of those marketing and sales expenses are an expense that goes towards your cost to acquire. That is the first of two key things that you need to understand when we're trying to get that number together. You'll hear a lot of times marketing agencies, marketing companies, and they're not wrong, but our customer acquisition cost, your CAC, is what they turn around and go, oh, by the time you take all your total spend to the total people you acquired and your conversions and views and all these different things that come funnel through, your CAC is $800, $2,000, whatever that number is. Again, not wrong, but they are not counting your HubSpot or Go High Level expense. They are not counting your time or anybody's time. They're not counting the person you pay to go do your social media video short reel editing for acquisition. Those things all matter there. And ultimately, it's that cost to acquire. We got to lump all those costs together. So that's the first big thing on that number. The other side of it, we have to do some simple division, is how many people did you acquire during that time period that you're adding the costs up? Commonly, we're going to look at this monthly, right? If you go weekly, cool, but you can't make that many changes on a week-to-week basis. So monthly is going to be my suggestion, at least when you're starting out. So look at last month. How many people did I acquire? Oh, I acquired 10 total people. Sweet. Awesome. Nice and easy. 10 people. How much did you spend? Well, I spent $10,000 total. Subscriptions, ad spend, softwares, video editors, all the things. Yep, $10,000. Okay, cool. So when I give you guys those two numbers, 10 people, $10,000, well, it cost me $1,000 per person to acquire them. Great. Do you not think that that's high? Well, if you're charging them $300 per month and they're only staying for 3 months, you can do the math pretty quickly, how that's going to go. This is one of the issues that we run into things like scholarships, right? going to give you a
Mhm.
discount. I'm going to get a bunch of people in. Guess what? You get $20,000, $30,000 in your bank account, which is fantastic. But all of them have now paid you for, you paid, you got 30 people for $30,000. They all gave you $1,000, but it costs
Mhm.
you $1,000 per person to acquire them. Well, guess what? In 3 months, you're going to run out of money with all those people. There's almost a situation where it was better not to acquire those people and never have that $30,000. And that's just simple math.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and to like put this in perspective, the people that feel like they're in the rat race and start over at zero and have no stackable business aspects, those are the people that do such a poor job because they're overwhelmed. They don't have the appropriate coaching systems. They take on too many clients at one time, which for most people, it seems like you can reasonably onboard about 2 clients at a time, depending on what your process looks like. Sometimes more, sometimes less, if you want to have a full client load and keep juggling those. But when you think about the end process of like if you gain 10, lose 10, and you're out $100 every single one, because again, they pay you 900, it costs you 1,000, you start to see that you're now setting up a losing model. And it's not a bad thing because all the time, because consider how Amazon, these people, they were late. Well, they were early to market and they were trying to get more market share. They're trying to get more people to consume the thing. So they had these calculated losses that they knew, hey, we just got to head down for a couple of years, get enough people using the thing so more people know about the thing, and then it'll spread itself. And now this is where Amazon is, now almost a verb. Hey, I'm gonna go Amazon something. You're like, oh, that's okay. Like no one bats an eye. So I will say that sometimes, to for early entrepreneurs to set the perspective of like you're probably going to lose money in terms of your opportunity cost and doing and spending more time. But as long as your bank account exceeds your hard costs or the things that you're actually spending dollars for, that's probably something that I would consider an acceptable loss. For most new coaches that are starting out and maybe have 0 to 5 clients, you're probably going to lose a little bit of money or value in some way. But as long as those clients get you more clients, that cost to acquire should go down as you become more known and as you establish a good brand reputation of like, you think about who you trust. Right now, Boeing, I would never trust Boeing to build a plane. I would cut every contract I had and I would go offshore. I'd find someone else because now the trust that we had in Boeing, as a plane manufacturer is drastically decreased. So their cost to acquire clients and to service contracts, they're going to have to come out of pocket because they did a shitty job and now they have a reputation. They have to now discount things heavily to maintain these contracts. So there's a lot of different levers here, but at the end of the day, you know, just understanding how much you're paying and how much you're getting is really the nature of what we're trying to drive home with cost
Yeah,
to
and
acquire.
there's very many times where losing money on an acquisition makes sense as long as it's
Hmm.
planned and calculated for some other
Yeah,
reason on the back end, on the other side, on the
yeah,
long-term game, on the referral engine, on the acquisition awareness side.
hmm,
Like, yeah, totally. But if you're not aware that every single time you're acquiring somebody, you're losing money, that's where it becomes a problem. And you get this influx of money that is
hmm,
guaranteed to go away in a period of time, and you get stuck in a almost inadvertent Ponzi scheme where you now have to go sell
mm,
somebody the next thing before you can even finish out your commitment on what you sold to some people that you gained prior. Not that you're doing it intentionally. Like it's just unfortunately business math. But it's just the way that
hmm.
it ends up happening. So very simple. Like,
What's a
what
Ponzi
was
scheme,
that?
Steve? I think some people might not know what a Ponzi scheme was. The first time I heard it, I had to look it up a couple
Well,
years back.
we, I guess we
You
can't
know
say
what
we've all heard of Bernie Madoff because I'm definitely getting a little bit older and everything like that, and
I've
some of
kind
you
of
you young bucks are a little bit younger. But long story short, one of the biggest issues or schemes that ever happened in financial history was by this guy Bernie Madoff. What he would effectively do is run around and say, "Hey, I'm going to invest your money for you, and I can make wild returns." I don't remember the specifics, but let's just say it's 20% every single year. So give me $1 million and I'll give you 20% back every year. Sure. Like, who isn't going to take that deal? The stock market gives you on average like 8 to 10% back. So you're going to more than double that and guarantee it practically. Yeah. So he would literally
hmm,
take your million, and then 1 year later give you $200,000. And then he would give you this fake document that said you still had your million invested. And you're like, man, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Now he would do that. He would take your million and he would take that million and he would effectively give 5 people their 200,000 from your million, or probably more like 2 people their 200K and keep 600K for himself. And then he knew,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, the clock has started. I have to go find the next person that is going to give me $1 million. So I can now give you 200,000 of that million. So you keep believing me. I'll give another person their 200K, and then I keep my 600K, and it's going to be amazing. And I'll just keep finding people to keep putting the money in, and I'll keep
Mm-hmm.
giving the couple of people that are coming due their money, and I'll make my money. And no one's going to know the
Mm-hmm.
wiser. Well, guess what? At a certain point in time, the gap becomes so big that he had to give 100 people their 200K back in 1 year, but he couldn't find enough people to give him new money to give them all the money back.
And he wasn't generating any new money on top of that. He was literally using people's
Yeah.
tuition or whatever to pay the other people. So there was no money
No,
generation
it was a
outside of getting
fake.
more
It was
people
completely
involved.
fake. And that's
Yep.
where in business,
Yep.
somebody gives you money for services. You spend all that money on whether you
Yeah.
needed to or not. And now all of a sudden you still owe all those people 2 months of services. Well, what do you have to do?
Mm-hmm.
Your typical business, well, all right, we got to go sell some things. Now, that is the answer.
Yep.
But if you literally right now, technically speaking, are in a situation where if you add up how many months of services do I owe people, do I have that money in my bank account? If the answer is no, and you have to go and get new clients in to support the business on the original people you
Mm-hmm.
owe things to, you are inadvertently creating this situation where you're relying on other people's money in order to go ahead and service the people you've already sold. Now, again, if this is part of your business plan, if you know you're going to dip into the red for a period of time, if you know that there's that risk and it's calculated and you understand and you're following the trajectory that you believe you should be, it's not uncommon and it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're completely clueless to this and you find yourself in the situation where you have to sell somebody something in order to keep going, you have inadvertently caused like chaos for yourself. And that's like we go down that we make the joke launch and struggle, right? We
Mm-hmm.
have launchandstruggle.com. At some point we'll figure out what we do with that website. But at the end of the
That's fun.
day, just launching to get cash in, but the cash doesn't actually cover your services you owe, you're going to continue to struggle until you solve that problem. You're on that kind of rat wheel race that's never ending. So
Mm-hmm.
keeping that in mind,
Mm-hmm.
your cost to acquire, literally every single expense that goes towards marketing and acquisition, divided,
Yep.
do your formula, do your math by the amount of people you get in. Here's how much I spent, 10,000 divided by the amount of people. Okay. Or rather, I guess it's people over the dollars the other way around. So how many people divided by $10,000, it cost me per single person 10,000 or $1,000 rather. So keep that in mind. That's your cost to acquire. That's one of the big 3 numbers. That's how we get our profit per acquisition formula.
Yeah. So now that we know how to calculate that, obviously it's kind of a when is this relevant, or what's the target that people should be shooting for would probably be the next question that some of our listeners are likely thinking at this point.
So in terms of target, that's
Generally.
honestly a hard one because you
Mm.
can weather a harder cost to acquire or a higher cost to acquire maybe if you have a bigger
Mm-hmm.
lifetime value, right? So you can spend
Mm.
$2,000 to acquire a person if you're getting $10,000 of lifetime value out of them, provided
Mm-hmm.
your operational costs aren't out of control. So that's where those 3 big
Yep.
numbers come into. If your actual profit per acquisition, value minus acquisition minus fulfillment, is a positive number,
Mm-hmm.
you're in a good spot where you can then adjust things. And that's really kind of
Mm-hmm.
that big indicator. In terms of a good number, there isn't a good number. If you're negative profit per
Mhm.
acquisition, well, hey, every single time you acquire a consumer, you're losing money. Like
Yeah.
that almost like
Yeah.
does that when people pay you, you then in turn lose money. That should raise a red flag.
Mhm.
So we need to reduce our
Yeah.
cost to acquire, increase our lifetime value, reduce our fulfillment expenses in order to make that formula work for us. Then we look to optimize. And when we are truly optimized, that's where the idea of do you want to or should you grow and or scale that we hear everybody talking about.
Mhm. Yeah. So just to kind of recap for everybody, like we have your profit per acquisition, which is the big number. And you can dig into that by looking at these other three numbers. We just talked about the cost to acquire, but Steve mentioned there's two other levers. If you're looking at what you want to change in your business, you can look at the cost to acquire, sales, marketing, all that other stuff. And you can look at the cost to fulfill or how much it costs you to actually deliver. And then how much that person spends with you across a lifetime, which is the lifetime value. And so those three domains are really going to be an essential component of you understanding what your business is doing. And if you don't know what that is or what that should be, obviously it depends. We do have workshops. You can always email us as well, and we'll make sure that you get an answer. But all that to say, thanks for joining us for part 2 of our 4 parts profit per acquisition series. Make sure you subscribe and turn the little notification thing on. So that way the next episode, when it comes out, you're not left hanging and you can actually fill in the gaps. Or if this is beyond 2025 when we recorded this, then you can't, you'll just right through it. So we'll see you guys in the next one.